Welcome back to Joy Recovery Radio, where we're dedicated to helping couples find healing and hope after sexual infidelity and betrayal trauma. We share real stories, practical strategies, and deep insights to support you on both sides of this difficult journey. We truly believe this message can change lives, and you can help us reach more people by engaging with our content. Wherever you listen, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube, please hit that follow or subscribe button. A quick like and a 5-star review also goes a long way, helping others discover our community when they need it most. Let's dive into today's episode.
Last week we talked about transformation, and we talked about how transformation or formation, spiritual formation, is automatic. We can be passive and it's happening. And today we're going to talk about how to be more intentional and active with our spiritual formation. But in order to understand how we change, we first have to understand, what does it mean to be human? What are we made out of? And when it comes to understanding what does it mean to be human, I have found that the Bible gives the most complete and realistic picture that I have ever encountered. A lot of modern approaches to change today, whether it's psychotherapy, psychology, self-help, medicine, they each have a piece of humanity, a piece of the truth. And most of them focus on just one dimension of our personhood and who we are. Psychology focuses primarily on the mind. Biology focuses on the body. Sociology focuses on our relationships. But the Bible gives a deeper picture of the human person. It's very multi-layered, and I have found it to be beautifully complex. It's not reductionistic, it's not simplistic, it's not one-dimensional. It's the most fully integrated, multi-dimensional view of the human person that I have seen in all of my studies and research. Basically, Scripture teaches that humans consist of 5 integrated, interconnected parts that are all woven together by God's design. And if you're going to experience transformation, it has to be in all 5 parts. So, to provide a rubric on what we're talking about, let's just walk through those 5 parts. The first part that the Bible talks about is what is called the Spirit. But it is also called in some verses either the heart or the will. And they're all referring to the same thing. This is the core of who you are. This is your control center. This is your will. It's the part of you that chooses things. Choices are made here. This is your agency. This is your volition. This is the part of you that says yes, or the part that says no. Your spirit governs the direction of your life. This is where your intentions are found. This is where your motives are formed. And in this arena, we face the biggest choice of every moment of every day. It's either self or it's surrender to God. That's the choice we face every moment in our spirit, self or surrender. And that by and large determines the choices that we make. The next part the Bible talks about is what's called the mind. The mind is where both our thoughts and our emotions reside. This is where your ideas are. This is where your core beliefs are. Your mental maps, your scripts, your feelings, your emotions, they're all found here. And in fact, what the Bible teaches is that thoughts and emotions are linked. You never have a thought without a corresponding emotion or set of emotions. And you never have emotions without corresponding thoughts. Those coexist together. And so what you think about or what you dwell on, it shapes what you end up feeling. And eventually, this greatly influences our spirit, our motives, and the choices that we make. The third part the Bible talks about is called the body. The body is not separate from our spiritual life, and we need to understand that. The body is the main stage where everything plays out in our life. For example, we live out our beliefs through our body. Our body is where our actions happen. It's where we have appetites. It's where we have habits. This is where our desires and our impulses live, is in our body. The fourth dimension the Bible talks about is, you could call it either social or relational, because we are wired by God for relationships. God himself exists as a community, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. God exists as a loving community, and he created us with that same capacity. In fact, when he made Adam, the only time in the creation narrative that he said something was off, something was not good, is when he said, "It is not good for man to be alone." And notice it says, "Let us make man in our image." It's plural. There's one God, but he exists in three persons or three aspects or three dimensions. He's a social God, and he made us to be social. So we are shaped by our relationships. Primarily, we are shaped by our family of origin, and that created a lot of the trajectory for our lives. But we're also influenced by friends and culture. This is where culture, or what the Bible calls the world, plays an influence on our personhood. The people that we spend the most time with would be a part of this social aspect. This is the aspect of our lives where we try to please others. We try to gain approval. We try to belong, or we try to improve our status socially. So this is a core aspect of who we are. There's one more dimension that the Bible talks about, and that is the soul. When the Bible talks about the soul, it's talking about that part of us that integrates everything else. Our soul is talking about us as a whole. Our soul is what holds together our spirit, our mind, our body, and our relationships into a single, integrated, interconnected whole. So you could say that the soul is the stream that flows through all the other four parts, keeping them interconnected. So a change in one part has an impact on the other parts. They are interrelated. It's important to notice when it comes to the way we change is that all of these influences influence our spirit or our heart or our will. That when it comes to passive formation, like we talked about last week, it's from the outside in. There are influences that if all we do is just wake up and breathe and go through our day, and there's no intention, there's no spiritual formation that's happening intentionally, but it's all unintentional, then it's happening from the outside in. The Bible talks about transformation being from the inside out. And so here's the thing about all of these parts, the will or the spirit, the mind, the body, the social aspect of who we are, and our soul. They don't work in isolation. They're not like separate rooms in a house. Think of them more like organs in a body, different systems that make up the whole, and each one affects the others all the time. So when one part of you in these 5 parts is off, the others feel it. And when one part heals, the others benefit. For example, let's say your body is exhausted, undernourished, or out of balance. It doesn't just stay in your body. It bleeds into your mind, and you start to feel anxious or foggy or discouraged. It also impacts your will, your motivation, and the choices that you make. Sometimes something as physical as a thyroid gland in your body, when it is low, extremely low, and there's a hormone imbalance, this can literally cause depressive thoughts, hopeless feelings, and even impact your will to want to end your own life. So the same is true the other way around. Let's say your mind is flooded with shame or resentment or fear. Your body will show it. Your muscles will tighten. You'll have insomnia or perhaps digestive issues or develop high blood pressure. And your will, that deep core center of choice, when our will gives up or it shuts down, the entire system that makes us human is impacted. Even your relationships play a role. If you isolate and avoid your partner long enough, your nervous system will literally change. Your body, your brain will start acting like if you dare to be vulnerable with your partner, you are now under threat. So holding all of this together is your soul, the part of you that integrates and coordinates everything else. Our soul is meant to be centered and connected to God. And that's when all the other parts start to line up in harmony and integration or integrity. When our soul is fractured, everything feels disjointed, and you will not be able to find peace no matter what you do or what you fix out of these parts. That's why real transformation always requires a whole person approach. You can't just focus on one part, the spiritual or the physical or the emotional, and ignore the rest of the human. Healing happens when all the parts start talking to each other again. When your will listens to your body and your mind, when your mind starts telling the truth to your emotions, when your soul finds its center again and its source in your higher power. That's integration. That's what it means to become whole. So if this is what we're made of, then here's the reality. We're always being shaped. Every one of these parts, even when you're not trying. Right now, through the world around you and the people you spend time with and the habits that you practice, you're being shaped. That's what we talked about last week. We called it the drift. It's unintentional spiritual formation. Every single one of us, we're being formed. The only question is this: by what or by whom? And just for review, last week we talked about how we change without even trying. And the first thing we talked about was stories. Stories begin to impact our mind. Everyone lives by a story or a script. It might be, I'm only as good as what I achieve, or people always leave or reject me, or if I can just stay in control, that's the only way I'll be safe. But there's some kind of story that's running our life. And these stories run in the background of your life like invisible scripts. They shape how you see yourself and how you respond to situations. The second thing we talked about last week are the relationships that we have. We mentioned that you show me the 5 people that you spend the most time with, and I'll show you your future. Because the people closest to you are forming you, whether it's for better or for worse. We become like the people that we do life with. So the question is not if your relationships are shaping you, but how are they shaping you? And then the third thing we talked about last week is how our habits, which is what we do with our body repeatedly, the habits we engage in shape us. Every little thing you do is doing something to you. How you wake up, your morning routine, how you handle the use of your phone, how you eat, how you rest, how you scroll, how you surf, how you spend money, how you talk to people. These small, repeated actions are shaping your total personhood. So whether you realize or not, you're already in a spiritual training program. Maybe you didn't even sign up, but you're in one. The question is this: who or what is the trainer? So if all this is true, that we're being shaped every single day by the stories we believe, the relationships we keep, the habits we repeat, the question becomes this: what would it look like if we were intentional about it? What if we stopped letting formation just happen to us passively and we started participating in it with some kind of purpose? That's the invitation of what we're going to talk about today, the actual work to experience transformation. How do we actually do that? So here's the deal. We're going to look at things that we've got to engage in, but we have to understand that this work we're going to talk about, it has to be more powerful than these three things: relationships, habits, and stories. It has to offset the way we're already being shaped, or we will not experience transformation. Let me give you an illustration. One of my spiritual heroes throughout history was a theologian named Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Right before World War II, he was one of the only theologians and ministers who stood up to the Nazi Empire. And when the Nazi Empire was at its height, and religious leaders in Germany were corrupt because of it, Bonhoeffer escaped and went out into the countryside to start this secret seminary of 150 young theology students. And part of it was theological training, and part of it was just living in community. It was during that time that his book came out called Life Together, which is one of the best books ever written on what true community is. Now, Bonhoeffer came from a secular, high-class German family. And so one day, his brother visited him out at this communal seminary and said, "Listen, Dietrich, this has to stop. You're embarrassing mom and dad and our family. You need to stop what you're doing and come home and take back your professorship, get a wife, enough of this weird Jesus thing that you're doing." And Bonhoeffer said to his brother, "Come with me." They got in a rowboat, they crossed the lake across from the seminary onto the other side of the lake where there was a Nazi training camp going on for Hitler youth. Bonhoeffer and his brother climbed the hill overlooking that training camp, and this is what he said: "What we're doing in that seminary has to be stronger than what they're doing in this camp." And I'd say the same thing to you and me, that whatever we're going to do in our spiritual formation, it has to be stronger than the stories we believe, the habits we engage in, and the relationships that we have. So let's look at the work. Let's look at how we counter these three things. The first thing we're going to talk about is how to counter the stories that we believe through teaching. That's the first practice. Teaching. Jesus came as a teacher. That's literally what the word rabbi means. It means teacher. That's what he spent most of his time doing. And that was on purpose, because we are built to need teaching. We need truth to offset the stories we believe. The best teachers and the best teaching does more than just tell you what's right or what's wrong. They give you a vision for what a good life looks like. So that's why so much of what Jesus taught was in the form of stories or parables. They were alternative stories to the stories that we believe. Someone once asked Ivan Illich, who is a South American philosopher, they asked him, what is the best way to change society? Is it through violent uprising or a slow, gradual reform? This was his answer. He said, neither. The best way to change a society is to tell an alternative story. And that's what Jesus as a master teacher did over and over again. Teaching after teaching, he offered an alternative story about what it means to be human, or to be sexual, or to be spiritual, or to live in community with others. And that kind of teaching, it gets into your head with this vision of what is a good life. And it starts to undermine the lies that we believe with the truth about reality and about God and about life. Paul says it this way in Romans 12. Don't be conformed to the world and their stories, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. There's that word again, transformed. How? By renewing your mind. So getting the right ideas into your head is the starting point, but it's not the ending point. You can't think your way to transformation. That's not enough. That's too one-dimensional. The way of Jesus is just that. It's a way of life. It's something that you don't only do with your mind, but you do with your body and your relationships and your spirit and your soul. We've been taught to believe in this age of enlightenment that we're basically brains on legs, that all we need is more data or some kind of better mental software update. So if you want to have a great marriage, just read a book on marriage. If you want to get in shape, just watch a YouTube video on diet and exercise, right? It's easy. Well, how's that working for you? Yeah, teaching matters. It's vital. It's where we start, but it's only the beginning, because your mind is a portal to the rest of who you are. So it's important, but it's not the whole package.
At joy-recovery.com, we offer personalized recovery coaching to help you move from pain to purpose. We also provide supportive groups where you can connect with others who truly understand. So, whether you're battling addiction, healing from betrayal, or rebuilding a brand new relationship, you're not alone. We can help. Go to joy-recovery.com today.
Let's look at the second thing to offset our passive shaping, and that is practices. This is how we offset the habits that we've been engaging in. This is absolutely critical. If you're new to the Bible, a great place to start is called the Sermon on the Mount. You find it in Matthew, his biography of Jesus, specifically chapter 5, 6, and 7. That short sermon is basically Jesus' manifesto for how to be human, what he called an abundant life. And if you've ever read it before, you know the bar, he sets it pretty high. He says things like, do not worry. And I'm glad that I've got that one down, except for, every day. He's also, in that sermon, he's the one who says, anyone who looks at a woman with lustful intent has already committed adultery with her in his heart. Yeah, that's a high bar. So throughout history, some people have always been saying about the Sermon on the Mount, that's impossible. That's just an ideal that can't be reality. But what they miss is how down to earth Jesus actually was. When you read the Sermon on the Mount really closely, you'll see that he just assumes that as humans, we're going to get mad. And people will get mad at you. And you're going to be tempted to lust. And you're going to be tempted to judge people. And you're going to be tempted to worry. And you're going to be tempted to buy more things than you really need. He knows that you're human, but he's still calling you to a higher way of living. And he expects that you can have that through practice. And that's why if you look at his sermon, he so brilliantly begins and ends the sermon with the idea of practice. At the beginning of the sermon, he says, whoever practices these things will be called great. And at the very end of his sermon, he says, Everyone who hears these words of mine and puts them into practice is a wise person. The kind of person who, metaphorically, they're building the house of their life on a solid rock. So here's his assumption. This is going to take practice. You don't just read his admonition to do not worry and go, oh, okay, cool. I'll stop worrying this week. No, you actually have to go and you have to practice that. This is what Richard Foster said in his beautiful book, The Celebration of Discipline, talking about spiritual practices. He said that most people think we change by trying hard instead of training hard. That's what we mean by practice. Here's an analogy. Let's say you're out of shape. Let's say you're overweight, or maybe you're even asthmatic. And tonight you decide, you know what? I'm going to run a marathon. So tomorrow morning you wake up, you lace up your shoes, and you try really hard to run 26.2 miles. What happens? You make it maybe 2 miles, or in my case, maybe 1 mile, and then you die. And you begin to think, well, it can't be done. It's impossible, but it can be done. Just not yet by the person you are today. So how do you become a person who can run a marathon? It's not by trying hard. It's by training. You start with 1 mile, and then 2. And you add 1 mile to your long run every week. And over time, through steady, intentional practice, you become the kind of person for whom running a marathon might be hard, but it's now possible. That's how we change. It's through practice. Most of you hear Jesus say, do not worry. And we just go out and we just try really hard not to worry. That doesn't work. Usually we make it about 10 minutes. And then the boss texts us and we're right back to anxiety. So it's easy to think, well, this is impossible. This can't be done. But according to Jesus, it can be done. You can tether your life to Jesus, learn from him, and engage in practices where you become the kind of person who is free from anxiety. What we talked about a few weeks ago, a non-anxious presence. We're talking about spiritual disciplines here. This is how we train to become like the character of God. So, for example, let's take peace. Let's say you want to become a non-anxious person. You could try really hard not to worry, or you could train. You either try hard or you train. If you follow the example of Jesus, it might look something like this. You decide, okay, I'm going to take a weekly Sabbath. I'm going to turn off my phone on that day. I'm going to stop buying and selling things. I'm not going to work that day. I'm going to rest, and I'm going to enjoy life with God and life with my loved ones. Or let's say you're going to begin the spiritual practice of silence and solitude. So instead of grabbing for your phone the first thing in the morning, you sit still, you breathe, you pray, you spend some time in Scripture. Or maybe you begin to practice the spiritual discipline of simplicity, where you own less things and you buy less things and you live free of clutter in your life. Over time, through training, not trying, you become a person who is full of peace. That's what we mean by practicing. It's one of the ways that we intentionally change. Let's look at the next element. We've talked about teaching. We've talked about practices. Now let's look at community. This is how we counter the relationships in our life. Well, how is community different from relationships? Community is this. It's where you have a relationship, but you have the same goal. This could be your recovery groups. This could be your sponsor. This could be your mentor, your spiritual director, your spouse or partner. Community is the incubator for spiritual formation. Community is where we actually grow. It's where we develop. It's where we succeed or fail. It's where we wrestle with the things of life, but it's in a safe space. When you're in true community, there's two things that happen: exposure and encouragement. What do I mean by exposure? It exposes the false beliefs we're engaging in. To have a group of people who will call us out, for better or for worse. They bring out the best in us. That's why community is both so good and so hard. And if you're going to be in healthy recovery, you're going to need to be in community where you can speak truth into each other's lives. You can expose each other's shadow. You notice each other's defects, and you bring it to the surface in a loving way. And that's good. That's how growth works. M. Scott Peck put it this way in his book, The Road Less Traveled. He said, mental health, so therapy or whatever we're engaging in, it's really all about one thing. It's an ongoing process of dedication to reality at all cost. The avoidance of reality and its challenges is basically to avoid life itself. This is what he's saying. We need exposure in our life. We need people in our life who will bring us back to reality at all cost. That's what mental health is. But exposure is not enough. We also need encouragement. People who see you as you are, but they also see your potential and who you're becoming. And they say, I want to walk with you into that. So the point is this: you can't transform by yourself. You need community. You need brothers in your life who have the same goal that you have, and you're able to expose and encourage each other. That is the context where transformation happens. Finally, all of this is made possible by God's Spirit. Notice that teaching and practice in community, they're not enough by themselves. They all orbit around the Spirit. He's the center of gravity. Our higher power is the source of transformation. He's the one that's at work in the teaching. He's the one working in your spiritual practices. He's the one that's flowing through those community relationships. He is the one that's actually changing you. Spiritual formation could be called a joint partnership between you and God. You have a part, God has a part. Our part is simple. We just looked at it. Training in truth, spiritual practices, and real community. After that, the rest is on God. Augustine, who was a 4th century theologian, put it this way. When he talked about transformation, he said, without God, we can't. But without us, he won't. That is probably the most beautiful way I've ever heard this partnership explained before. You do your part, the Spirit does the heavy lifting. And I don't think it's 50-50. I think it's probably closer to 99 and 1%, where he does a lot of the heavy lifting. But as Augustine says, without him, we can't do it. In our program, we call this powerless. We can't change ourselves. If we could, we already would have. But without us and our work, he won't do it. So as you renew your mind, as you practice the spiritual disciplines, as you live in community, you are opening yourself up to the presence and the power of the Spirit. And over time, through the Spirit, transformation happens. And this leads us to a deeper question. What if you leave God out? What happens when we try and do all of this on our own? So I want to make this really clear. I am not describing a self-improvement plan. That's not what this is, where we can just leave God out of the equation. And I know that we live in a world that is obsessed with improvement, new habits and new tools and new life hacks. And many of us have been there. We've tried to muscle our way into change through trying harder. And we've told ourselves, well, this time it's going to be different and I'm going to change. And for a while it works, but eventually self-driven change fails. You will run out of steam because all you're really doing is rearranging what's on the surface without healing what's underneath. When we leave our higher power out of this process, change really just becomes another exercise of control. We're just chasing a better version of ourselves instead of becoming the true version of ourselves the way God intended. It doesn't lead to freedom. Self-improvement begins with self at the center. Transformation begins with surrender to the Spirit at the center. With opening ourselves to a higher power that is greater and loving, one who can actually reshape us from the inside out. So you have a choice here. Are you going to make this a self-improvement plan, or are you going to surrender your life to your higher power? This is what that looks like. Self begins with willpower, and you say to yourself, I've got to fix myself. Surrender, that begins with surrender. You admit, I can't do this, not by myself. I need help. I'm powerless. Self is motivated by guilt or shame or a fear of failure. But surrender to the Spirit is motivated by love, trust, and a desire to grow. Self-driven change focuses on behavior management, changing what I do. But surrender is focused on inner renewal, changing who I am. Self-driven change relies on external control, like rules or boundaries or cameras or monitoring software, all of which is helpful, but it's not going to lead to true freedom and change. Whereas surrender flows from an integrated alignment of all of your parts. Surrender to God, your spirit, your mind, your body, your relationships, your very soul. Self-driven change, I will admit, it produces some quick results as you white knuckle, but they don't last. Whereas surrender produces slow growth that endures and deepens over time. It's permanent change. Self-driven change is driven by anxiety and comparing ourselves to others, whereas surrender is sustained by grace and connection to God. Self-driven change leads to exhaustion, and you will burn out, whereas surrender leads to rest and healthy integration of all your parts. Self-driven change, if it works, it ends in pride. If it doesn't work, it ends in shame. Whereas surrender ends in humility, gratitude, and a compassion for yourself and compassion for others. Self-improvement says this: I'm going to become a better version of me. Whereas transformation through surrender says, I'm going to become the truest version of me, the one God created me to be. And finally, self-help rearranges the outside. Transformation heals the inside. So this begs the question, how is it going with your higher power? Think about that. In recovery, if we have a sponsor or a meeting or even a therapist that is not working for us, it's not helpful, it's not getting us the transformation that we're looking for, we don't keep that meeting. We don't keep that sponsor. We don't keep that therapist. We make a change. We fire that therapist. We find a new meeting. We find a new sponsor. Why? Because recovery is too important to waste our time on things that aren't helping us. With that same energy and thought, it might be time for some of you to ask that same question about your concept of your higher power. If your concept of God, your higher power, is not helping you heal, and it's not helping you grow, and it's not helping you transform, it's not helping you become more whole and integrate all the parts of who you are, maybe it's time to retire that version or that concept of your higher power. I meet a lot of people in recovery whose higher power is basically either their dead grandma, or maybe it's their brothers in recovery, or maybe it's just some kind of vague energy. And listen, there's no judgment here. If that's helping you, fantastic. I want you to get well. But if it's not helping you, if it's not leading to transformation, maybe it's time to reconsider your concept of a higher power. So let's bring all this together. You take all this teaching, practice, community, with the Spirit at the center. All of this change happens over time. So let's unpack that for a minute. We live in a culture, I'm very aware, where everything is right at my fingertips. I can get on Amazon right now and I can order something that'll be here in 2 hours. I can message any of you instantly through text. I can cook my lunch in 2 minutes in a microwave. I can DoorDash and have any meal I want instantly here. Just instant everything. But the reality is the best things in life take time. There's no shortcut to spiritual formation. There's no app that I can refer to you where you get some kind of transformation. Because early on in spiritual formation, God begins to work on the surface stuff, but the longer that you walk with him, the deeper he goes into things that are really lodged deep inside of you. So there is healing, there is freedom, but it is deep work, and deep work takes time. When I say time, I'm talking about two things. Number one, it's going to take a long time. It will take years to fully actualize into the person that God meant for you to be, maybe even decades. But when I say it takes time, I also mean a second meaning, and that is it's going to take an investment of your time today in spiritual practices, teaching, and community. And like any relationship, you're only going to get out of this what you put into it. That's why some people who begin to follow their higher power, within a year, they have more growth than they've ever had in their life. The average American spends 5 hours a day on their phones. They swipe it 2,600 times a day. 20 minutes for the average American is spent scrolling social media or reading the news first thing in the morning. That is enough time to pray. And if you did that every day, you would read through the entire Bible in a year. So when guys tell me I'm just too busy for spiritual practices, I just smile and I say, no, you're not. You're not too busy. It's just not a priority. You're busy with other things. Start small, 10 minutes a day, 20 minutes a day. If you're too busy for that, then the truth is you're too busy to be transformed. What you really have to do is reorient your life around these three things: staying connected to the Spirit, training, spiritual practices, and community. I want to leave you with this. Transformation is going to cost you. It will. It will cost you time. It'll cost you perhaps some relationships. It'll cost you maybe some of your hobbies and activities. It'll cost you your comfort at times, your preferences, your freedoms, your convenience. But we also need to look at it this way. We need to talk about the cost of not changing. What's the cost of not transforming? I decided to become an apprentice of Jesus and follow him as my higher power. And that has cost me quite a bit to do that. But as I counted the cost, it was going to cost me even more if I didn't do that. Let's say you decide you're going to start having a Sabbath. That's going to cost you something. But it will also cost you even more if you decide not to do that. It's going to cost you if you decide to slow down the pace of your life, or if you decide to start practicing silence and solitude on a consistent basis, or you decide I'm going to meditate on scripture for 10 minutes a day. All of those things will cost you, but it will cost you even more if you don't do those things. It will take time and cost to be transformed, but it's worth it. Transformation's possible. You can change. You don't have to stay stuck the way you are right now. You can grow. You can become whole and integrated and you can become the person that God meant for you to be.
That wraps up another episode of Joy Recovery Radio. We hope our conversation today brought you clarity, comfort, or a new perspective on your journey. Remember, healing is possible, and you don't have to walk this path alone. To learn more about how we can support you, visit us at joy-recovery.com. There, you'll find information about our individual and couples coaching practice designed to provide tailored support for both addicts and betrayed partners. You can also explore our various online groups, offering safe and confidential spaces for connection, shared experience, and growth. Thank you for joining us today. Until next time, choose joy.